Alright, listen. Over the last few years, it has become something of a trend to make movies about villains. Between Sony's mess of a Spider-Man universe, the 2 Joker films, The Penguin, and the upcoming Clayface, there's some precedent for it. Now, I'm not gonna pretend that even half of these are good, but the first Joker made like $1 billion, and The Penguin is awesome, so what are you gonna do about it? They're here to stay. In this video, I want to go over a few Batman villains that I think should get movies or shows focused on them as the main character, whether that be in the DCU, Matt Reeves as the Batman universe, or in a standalone setting. There are a fair few characters that have already gotten this treatment. Catwoman, Joker, and Harley Quinn have all had movies. Harley Quinn, the Penguin, and Kite Man, for some reason, have had shows. And on top of that, both Clayface and Bane Deathstroke have movies in the works. And I'm like 90% sure Catwoman is getting a solo project in Matt Reeves' universe at some point, so I'll be avoiding all of those characters. I have 3 movies and 3 shows to pitch to you today. Let's get to it. I want to start off with my favorite Batman villain, and that is Killer Croc. For a movie starring him, I'd want to see a deep dive on his origin story. During the New 52, there was an issue of Batman and Robin focusing on Killer Croc that gave us an origin story for him beyond just having a skin condition, which is what most versions of the character stick to. Adapting parts of that comic, this would be a tragedy showing Waylon Jones turning from an innocent kid into the villain we know him to be. Depending on the version of Killer Croc we're talking about, he does some pretty depraved stuff, whether it's living in the sewers, killing Jason Todd's parents, or even eating people. The question at the heart of this movie would be what drives a person to get there. While the comic mostly deals in flashbacks, I think a movie should be chronological. His father was never in the picture and his mother dies in childbirth, so his aunt takes him in. When he starts to grow scales, she forces him to scrub his skin until the scales come off. He gets bullied at school, hate crimed, and tortured for his skin and the way his eyes start to change. After years and years of this, something finally happens to make him snap. He kills the aunt and flees, trekking up north from Florida. He joins a circus where again he gets viciously abused, and that cycle continues everywhere he goes. He bounces around from place to place and eventually arrives in Gotham. While at first everything goes the same way it usually does, there is one person that makes an attempt to connect with Waylon. They agree to meet up somewhere, and when Waylon arrives, it turns out he was just being used as a fall guy, while this guy gets away with a robbery. Not having fully grown into the Killer Croc we know, the cops shoot him and bullets pierce his skin. He gets arrested at gunpoint and swiftly relocates to Arkham Asylum, as that seems to be the only place capable of containing and caring for him. Instead of being given a normal cell, he gets stuck in a sublevel behind iron bars. At first he still gets fed, mostly chunks of raw meat. He gets violently ill from it, as well as the unhygienic space he's being kept in. Eventually the feeding stops. He considers resorting to eating the rats. Having grown considerably in size and power due to his skin condition during his time in Arkham, he manages to break through the rusty metal bars keeping him in and escapes out onto the streets of Gotham, wreaking havoc, especially targeting the guy who put him in there. By the time he finds that guy, Batman and Robin are on the scene to try and stop him. They put themselves between Croc and the man and give him a chance to do the right thing, the type of chance he was after for all the movie so far, and he chooses not to. He chooses vengeance. He chooses to lean into being the monster he was branded all his life. He tries to kill the man, but Batman and Robin stop him, withholding that final catharsis. For the second part of this video, I think it's long past time that we get a solo project featuring the most dangerous, most interesting, and by far the best Batman villain of all time, Killer Moth. The Crypto the Superdog shorts are a lot of fun in a Saturday morning cartoon kind of way, but call me greedy, I want more. The subsection of supervillains that is not particularly threatening and rely on silly gimmicks is at its strongest with Batman, and I think they'd make a great cast for a Roadrunner v Coyote type of show. Killer Moth is probably the funniest possible character to use for this because he started out being an anti-Batman that protects criminals from Batman the same way Batman protects innocents from them. I'd really like to see Killer Moth try to set traps for the heroes and have them backfire the same way Wile E. Coyote has. We can use different Bat family members like Batgirl, Red Robin, Spoiler, and Signal as the superheroes Killer Moth is targeting, and similarly stupid villains like the Calculator, Ten-Eyed Man, Egghead, and Film Freak. I should also add that I really want Bathead and Bootface to be in there because I think it's really funny that they're called Bathead and Bootface because Batman hit one of them in the head with a batarang and kicked the other in the face, leaving a boot print. That should be in some kind of adaptation, and this is the perfect place for it. The plot here should be paper thin. It's really just a normal cartoon. I would like to see a more regular release schedule than the Crypto shorts because they're pretty random at this point. I think we have 3, but they just kind of happened. It's not like there needs to be much advertising for this, it just needs to be somewhat consistent. For the art style, I really like the messy but clear aesthetic that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem movie had, so something resembling that but flatter would be very fun to see. That being said, anything goes here. Something something more resembling some comic artist styles would be very cool too, as long as everyone's properly credited and paid, of course. Next, let's shift gears to the DCU. The whole Batman part of the universe is kind of up in the air right now. It's looking like The Brave and the Bold will be directed by Andy Muschietti, with Christina Hodson writing it, which is pretty disappointing to a lot of people, so I think using villain movies to emphasize different core values of Batman as a character would work really well here. One of the most important ones is rehabilitation. There's plenty of Batman villains that can and have been rehabilitated, but the one I would like to use for this is the Ventriloquist. Like most Batman villains, there's more than one Ventriloquist. I would like to use the first, Arnold Wesker. Some of the basic ideas of this character would work excellently on screen. The ambiguity of whether Scarface, the puppet he has on his hand, is actually sentient and wants him to commit crimes, or if it's just a figment of Arnold's imagination, could be beautiful. Furthermore, it could be pretty cheap. Practically, making movies like this can be a risk for DC, especially if it's an unknown character like the Ventriloquist, but if this is produced with a production budget of potentially under $1 million, this could be absolutely worth it. Aside from Arnold himself, the only real Batman-associated character I would want in the movie is Leslie Tompkins, acting as a psychiatrist helping Arnold stay on the straight and narrow. He's been in Arkham and was discharged with a bill of good health. He has a weekly appointment with Leslie and is currently going through a rough patch after being fired from his job and failing to make rent. What was just normal issues with stress and self-image turned much worse when Scarface starts talking to him again from deep in the closet where Arnold had stowed him. Taking some inspiration from both Split and Child's Play, I want to get a real insight into Wesker and how he perceives himself in Scarface. He desperately wants to be better, and at first he ignores Scarface, trying to maintain some level of normalcy, but that soon collapses. Scarface becomes a horror character. He can't move on his own, but he tugs on every string he can to unravel Arnold's mind, worming back into the place he used to be. Once again, Arnold becomes dependent. He starts slipping. He tries to get rid of Scarface. He throws it out the window in the trash, but when he wakes up the next day, he's back in the living room. For a full week, he fights like hell to be okay, but Scarface keeps going. He starts missing hours out of his day, even missing his appointment with Leslie because of it. The next day, he wakes up and finds a present, a gift from Scarface, a gun. Leslie shows up to check on him in person, and Scarface points the gun at the door. At that moment, from a few blocks away, Wesker hears the loud clunk of the bat signal being turned on. He looks out the window and stares at the yellow light in the sky. He takes Scarface off of his hand and throws him on the ground. A TV show I'd love to see in the DCU is Deadshot. Deadshot is pretty high on my list of favorite Batman rogues, mostly because of everything John Ostrander and Kim Yale did with him. Both the original Suicide Squad run and the Deadshot mini from 1988 cemented him as a very mentally ill, somewhat well-intentioned guy that doesn't care whether he lives or dies. He's usually pretty selfish, but it doesn't take too much for him to be fiercely loyal to someone, and that's a really interesting dynamic that can be explored in detail in his own show. After distancing himself from the Suicide Squad, he returns home to find his son has been kidnapped. A conspiracy that turns out to be connected to his parents. Right off the bat, I do want to recast him from being Will Smith in the DCEU. It's a different universe, so I was expecting that already, but I can't take Will Smith seriously at this point, and I want to be able to take Deadshot seriously, especially within a story like this. The most obvious difference is that the DCU doesn't have a Suicide Squad anymore, which means that the start of the show should be very different. This doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. We could just borrow from the start of Deadshot's other miniseries from 2005, where he's generally a mercenary and there's no direct ties to Waller, but I would like to integrate him into the current status quo of the DCU. Waller may not be allowed to use human prisoners anymore, but Deadshot isn't a prisoner. For the current characterization of Waller in the DCU, her hiring a mercenary to do dirty work isn't far out, so that pretty much makes sense. We'll establish that Deadshot was a major member of the Suicide Squad back when it was up and running, and the dynamic between him and Waller is mostly the same as it was then. Difference is, he earned his freedom through the sentence reductions the squad offers. He tolerates Waller's disrespect because he doesn't particularly value himself all that much. If there's one thing Waller understands though, it's prioritizing family. So when he gets word of trouble with his kid, she lets him go immediately. From there, the story has plenty of twists and turns, and an adaptation of it could easily change a lot of things to add a little more of a mystery angle to it. On a technical level, I'd like for this to borrow from 24 in how it approaches time. For the uninitiated, 24 is a show made up of 24 episode seasons, where each episode is 1 hour in the story, totaling to a full day. For Deadshot, I don't expect a show to be greenlit in this day and age with 24-hour-long episodes, but going in the direction of 12 hours would be great. Showing Floyd's life in real time would be a great way to humanize him, and the time-sensitive nature of the story of that Deadshot mini has tension built into it that is only amplified by this real-time approach. From there, Deadshot could be a major player in the Waller show and the DCU broadly as an antagonist to the Bat Family, Arrow Family, and other Justice League members. I could also see him coming back to the Suicide Squad or Creature Commandos, whatever shape that ends up taking. The most promising space for Batman's world right now is easily Matt Reeves' The Batman universe. The first film was a great start, and the Penguin really pushed it into being a lived-in universe with boundless potential. There were rumors of a bunch of different spin-offs, like a GCPD show that was at some point in the works. That was reworked to be an Arkham Asylum show and then axed. However, after the Penguin, I want to see more of that place. Seeing the Arkham Asylum of this world explored in more detail would be really interesting, especially if we do have Riddler or Joker appearing in future projects. Understanding just what's going on in there beyond even what we saw happen to Sophia would be very interesting. Arkham Asylum is such a big place with so many things to explore, and I want to really lean into that. Going with a similar length show to the Penguin, I want Arkham Asylum to center a mystery at the heart of the institution. Each of the 8 episodes follows a different character in the asylum that gives us just a little piece of the puzzle until we reach the top of the food chain. Ideally, the events of each episode take place during the same one evening. The first episode would follow a new inmate being welcomed into the asylum. As the audience, we're being introduced to this environment through this new inmate's eyes, and we see, like we did briefly in the Penguin, how they treat their inmates. From the inmate's perspective, we can't make out much of what happens behind the scenes, but we start to notice things. Guards scrambling, a session with a doctor is suddenly interrupted, a strange noise at night. The next episode also has a restricted perspective, but focused on the janitor. That episode ends with the janitor seeing something he shouldn't, we don't know what, and being killed for it. Piece by piece, we learn more about the asylum. So how is this about a Batman villain? Well, that's where the character choices come in. There's a fair few Batman villains that have a long history at Arkham Asylum: Harley Quinn, Black Mask, and for the purposes of this show, Scarecrow and Hugo Strange. Whether Julian Rush from the Penguin actually ends up becoming this universe's Scarecrow or not is still up in the air, but I would be completely down for it. And this show could further showcase his descent into villainy. Following his patiences, Julian Rush's, and Arkham staff's perspectives of the experimentation happening behind closed doors in special rooms allows us to build the horror of it slowly and meticulously. But notably, Julian Rush is not the one doing the experimentation. That's just a red herring. Hugo Strange is the one really behind it. Julian is still on the right side of things for now, and he even tries to figure out what's going on. Hugo Strange catches him before anything can be done to put a stop to things. The last episode then would be from Strange's perspective, almost a victory lap. We see what really happened that day, and we see for the first time, from the first perspective, how it ends. Hugo is obsessed with solving human psychology, understanding ultimately what it is that makes them tick and how he can exploit that. Following the events of the Batman and the Penguin, he started using fear to cut to the heart of this question, and he finally succeeded. Hugo Strange's experimentations pan out at the cost of Julian's sanity, and the Scarecrow is born. The final movie in this video, similarly set in the Batman's universe, is Anarky. Anarky is really interesting because he's not really a villain. He's usually categorized as such, and he does come into conflict with the Bat family, but that's not what he was supposed to be. He was created at first with the hopes that he might become the next Robin. That didn't end up panning out because Tim Drake was already on the scene, but it should speak to his character. He didn't kill, didn't really do much in the way of evil, he only really wanted to help people by strong-arming the powerful and corrupt. That's a character that I think fits really well in this version of Gotham. Unlike Deadshot, this couldn't be based on the Anarky miniseries because that featured Etrigan and Darkseid, which doesn't really fit here, but the principles work. Lonnie Machin is trying to find some kind of reason to everything that's going on in his life. He's a middle-class kid, so the flood didn't affect him in the same way it did Vic or Oz, but it did affect him nonetheless. He ventures out into Gotham as Anarky, using lifts and a special head to make himself seem much taller than he is. He goes around to clubs and factories, interrogating the owners. He even corners a police lieutenant, all to understand what evil really is, and more importantly, why people do evil, because he just doesn't get it. This should be an extremely demoralizing exercise for him. Even the cop, who we at first thought would be a good guy, turned out to be the opposite. When he's about to give up on the idea that there is any rhyme or reason to Gotham and to evil, two things he now conflates, he should realize that Batman is the person to ask. Batman should give him that positive perspective. This can show that Batman's new approach to crime fighting does inspire hope and does actually help people. Anarky doesn't have to show up at any point after this in the Batman Part 2 or anywhere else, because with Batman he can at least start to understand. And that was the last of the pitch I have for you today. There are way too many Batman villains, so there's plenty available for a follow-up video. Definitely let me know what you think of these and what villains you'd like to see me talk about in the future. Don't forget to watch Clayface when it comes out on September 11th, and have a good one.